In the last episode, we took a look at Gameloft's weird Assassin's Creed game for the DS. For those of you who haven't seen that video, and don't want to go back to spend 15 minutes watching a video that I put a lot of love and care into, spending over a month on it capturing footage, recording audio, and editing together for the people who love and enjoy my content to watch, well then luckily for you I can condense those 15 minutes into one sentence. So, might as well never watch it now. It was kind of interesting in the fact that it was a thing that actually existed, but outside of that novelty, it wasn't really all that good. In any case, I'm still in a phase of my life I've decided to call the I really want to play Assassin's Creed Origins, but my PC can't run it, and I refuse to spend another £15 on it so I can play it on PS4, so instead of doing that, I'm playing through every Assassin's Creed game I own in order to satiate that first phase. So why not continue looking at weird, obscure Assassin's Creed games by taking a gander at what the other side of the handheld spectrum at the time got instead of this mistake, I believe is what I called it a lot. Welcome to Port Patrol, the show where I look at weird and interesting ports and spin-offs of our favourite games. That felt really weird to say, and today we are taking a look at Assassin's Creed Bloodlines for the PSP. Developed by Kryptonite Games, a company that apparently still exists but hasn't made anything in nearly a decade, are a developer who have, or had, I guess, quite a decent background in ports and spin-offs, among other things working on the Harry Potter games on the GBA and LEGO Star Wars 2 on the DS, a game that is so notoriously buggy and broken that everything they made for it was pretty much unusable when it came to making the complete collection, and thus wasn't used at all. Looking at this list, there's actually a lot of good Port Patrol material on here, so just gonna save this page for later if you don't mind me. Unlike the DS game, Bloodlines aimed to be much more faithful to the original game, copying the classic Assassin's Creed 1 formula that we all know and... okay, well I think love's a strong word here, to an almost perfect T. At this point, I feel it's worth noting that I'm going into this video assuming you know all about the original Assassin's Creed game, as I'm going to be comparing the two a lot. I would normally go over the original game first, but I already did that in the last video, so if you want to know more, go there. In all honesty, they did such a bang-up job of recreating the original game here that there really isn't that much for me to say about it. If you liked this, then you'll like this, and if you like this, then you'll like that. It really translates that well across. So video over, I guess. Okay, you guys know me and how much I love to obsess over tiny little details that don't matter. This video is nowhere near finished, so let's start again from the top. Bloodlines is a sequel to Assassin's Creed 1 in the same way that Revelations and Brotherhood are to 2. So while the game takes place after the first one, it plays near enough identically to it. And as you can see from the gameplay, identically really is the word for it. It has the same control scheme, all the same moves, all the same Ubisoft towers to climb, and the combat is as stylish and flashy as ever. The fact the PSP is missing 2 triggers and an extra analog stick honestly isn't as big as a hindrance as you would first think. Though not having perfect control over the camera is an issue that showed itself and proceeded to completely screw me over a few times. For the most part, it does an alright job looking at what you want to, and if it doesn't, you can just tap L to put it behind you. The rest of the controls have held up perfectly though, really making this one of the few, if not the only game, I'm too lazy to go check to be honest, I've ever covered in this series that plays just as well as the original. But as we all know from the existence of Assassin's Creed, having fun gameplay alone isn't enough to make a game fun. And by that I mean the parkour can be super fun, the combat is satisfying, but in a game where all you do is sit on a bench and follow a bloke down an alleyway, it makes that fun gameplay experience become boring. So let's see if this game learned anything from its bigger brother. And the answer to that question is yes. Yes, it did. The world is significantly smaller than that of the original, only taking place in about 2 or 3 different cities, which I know doesn't sound like a great start to this segment, but I honestly think it works to this game's advantage. My least favourite part of Assassin's Creed was always the pointless bollocks it tries to make you collect throughout your journey. The flags in 1, the feathers in 2, the animus fragments in Black Flag. I still have no idea what any of these do, yet I still feel inclined to pick them up, and it's made even worse by the fact there's freaking millions of them cluttering up the map and just making it look really ugly. Like, I'm sure if I really wanted to, I could go out and collect all 100 flags that are in the Kingdom area, but why? Why would I want to do that? Add on top of that stuff like the 100 towers you need to climb up in every single town, the thousands of citizens who need saving around every corner, the million chests that need looting on every balcony. It's like, what the hell? Am I looking at a map, or am I looking at digital diarrhea? Wow, I love the irate gamer. The small cities of Bloodlines, and the even smaller sections they've been divided into, really help with this. Instead of 100 towers to climb in a city, there's now 1 per area. Instead of 30 pointless side missions, there are now only 2, and they are a lot less copy and pasted than in the original 2. Instead of pointless flags that don't do anything, the hidden collectibles are now Templar coins that actually do something. Wahey! Picking them up, alongside doing those previously mentioned side missions. And yes, I know these side missions in the original increased your health as well, but they still kind of sucked, okay? Gives you experience points that can be used to level up Altair's abilities. And it was great! Instead of actively avoiding doing the side activities, I was actually going out of my way to try and find them so I could get stronger. And also the fact that these side missions are a little bit more structured and tailored than the copy-paste stuff from the original, that really does help too. It sounds insane to say, but this might actually be a better game than the original game was. Though, if you've ever played it, you know that's really not that hard to do. I'm saying all these lovely things about the game, and I've barely even scratched the surface of this game's gameplay. The game starts in Acre, 1191. Or at least I think it's Acre. They kinda say it a bit weird in the game, but I really can't remember how. It has been 1 month since the assassin Altair struck down the Templar leaders in the Holy Land, and now, under the leadership of Armand Bouchard, the Templars scramble to recover the mysterious Apple of Eden. Not content to wait for his enemies to strike, Altair takes the fight to them. Gotta admit, it's very convenient for the game to launch every time with this brief summary of the game's story, because God knows I was far too lazy to do it myself. Gonna guess this means that Bloodlines was neither inspired by historical events and characters, nor was it designed, developed, and produced by a multicultural team of various beliefs, sexual orientations, and gender identities. So I mean, at this point, is it even really an Assassin's Creed game? Taking place in Cyprus instead of the Middle East, though you'd be hard-pressed to tell the difference, seeing how the buildings look exactly the same. The game has you running around doing missions in a much more traditional open-world way than the very stilted and copy-paste style of the original game. By that I mean, instead of walking into a bureau and standing around for 5 minutes as some guy talks to you as all you can do is change the camera angle, at which point then the same 6 missions appear on the map, 18 times each. You then run off and do those for 2 hours, assassinate some random person you'd never seen before, then repeat it 6 more times until you beat the game. The layout of this game falls much more in line with later Assassin's Creed games. So instead you enter the bureau, are given the mission in a quick, concise cutscene, do the mission, the story will develop in another cutscene, and then you move on to the next objective. While the missions in this game really aren't anything special, compared to what you had to do in the original, it's a masterclass in game design. Sometimes you might have to chase someone down or assassinate them, which is fairly standard stuff, But the real standout missions are the ones where you have to infiltrate an enemy fortress, where the game turns more linear, and it's like a nice, short contained challenge, where the combat and platforming elements really shine through. It's these moments that tore me away from the open world, yet ended up being my favourite moments. And that made me start wondering if Assassin's Creed needed to be open world in the first place. Certainly later games in the series like Black Flag made much better use of it, but especially in the original game, I feel like it doesn't really do anything with it to justify having it. Really, the only reason it had an open world was because if it didn't, then the game would be about 30 minutes long and lose the one part of it that's actually fun. This game has an open world too, likely because that's what the original had as well, and while there isn't really anything wrong with it, honestly it's pretty good, you know. I still can't help but want more of the really fun linear levels. I kind of want Altair's Chronicles, but actually good. But I digress. Regardless of what I think about that, the game is still enjoyable either way, and there's nothing wrong with the open world, though don't expect much of a challenge going into this game. Combat is fun, enjoyable, but incredibly easy. It's a near enough carbon copy of the original game's combat, and unlike that game, you start with all your abilities, so you can one-hit counter people straight from the get-go. But as I soon found out, there really isn't any reason to do that. This game has the exact opposite problem I had with the DS game. In that game, enemies would constantly block attacks, dragging battles on and making them really unsatisfying. What we have here is a system where even if the enemy is blocking, you still do just as much damage as if they weren't. I don't actually know if that's the case, but it certainly feels like it when 3 hits is enough to kill near enough every enemy in the game, regardless of if they appear to be blocking or not. Obviously, grabbing and countering are still options, but these moves are a lot less enticing when I can just brute force my way through combat by tapping the square button repeatedly. That doesn't make the combat bad though. It may be easy, but I mean, was the combat in Assassin's Creed ever not? It still looks flashy, it's still fun to do, just if you're looking for a challenge, for the most part you won't find it here. The real standout fights are the boss battles, and yeah, okay, they're still pretty easy, but there was one that was actually really cool. It's against a character called the Witch, and it's just way too cool to be an Assassin's Creed game. It has a good setting, a cool gimmick to the boss fight. It was actually pretty hard. Like, what is it doing here? In the last video, I said that the original Assassin's Creed game was my favourite in the series. In hindsight, that was probably one of the most retarded things I've ever said. Since going back and playing through 2 and Black Flag, yeah, those games are like a million times better. The first game still has my favourite setting, which I think plays a large role in why I said that, and it's fairly unobtrusive with all the anima stuff that I really don't care about. However, I can safely say, without a single bit of hesitation on my part, that Bloodlines is a far better game than the first one ever was. The first game really only ever felt like a tech demo, like Ubisoft had created this amazing game engine and had absolutely no idea what to do with it. Bloodlines, as dumb as this sounds, feels like the fulfillment of that original idea, and is honestly what the first game should have been like. Obviously it's not perfect, but I'm far more forgiving to its shortcomings considering that it is a handheld game, and even taking them into account, I would definitely be willing to give it a score of at least 63 out of 100? What is wrong with you people? Had I been reviewing this game 10 years ago when it came out, I would absolutely recommend it to those who want more Assassin's Creed, but I would have also been 11, and that video would have been rubbish. But now that I'm both older and wiser, I mean yeah, it's still worth playing, definitely more worth playing than the actual original Assassin's Creed. Now you could say that being better than literally the worst game in the series isn't exactly hard to do, and you could literally pick one out of the 11 other main games to play instead of this one, And yeah, don't really have anything to counter that with, to be honest. But I suppose that's the thing about Paw Patrol and the games I cover, isn't it? Logically speaking, there is almost no reason to play any of the games I talk about, because better versions of those games exist, or better entries in the series exist. But this show isn't really about logic, or offering the best way to play any of these games, is it? There's something about these weird ports that keep drawing us back in, even though we know that there are much better games out there we could be playing. In a sense, when I recommend a game, I'm not basing that recommendation on just its quality, but its weird factor, and if that is actually enough to make you want to play it. And as for Assassin's Creed Bloodlines, sure, there might be better Assassin's Creed games out there, but honestly, I still enjoyed my time with it. And the fact that the PSP managed to get an Assassin's Creed game of such high quality is astounding to me. And if it is to you too, then hey, I can't think of many better ways to spend 99p. Plus £2 for post and packaging.